So can you share more about how did you apply and what the process was?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I can start off by talking about what it takes to be a Microsoft Garage intern, because I think they're looking for very specific things that I believe like everybody could have, but it's important to know that you show that like properly.
Right.
So um, I found that a well-defined resume is really important. And I think one of the reasons they reached out to me as well as multiple other people from my program is if they had previous industry experience. But this doesn't mean that if you don't have any previous industry experience, Microsoft Garage won't look at you. Things like participating in clubs, hackathons, going to industry events are also count as experience in my opinion, because all these things you can learn a lot about the design community, you can learn a lot about how to tackle different design problems. So even though you might not have official internship experience, taking that extra effort to go to hackathons, go to design conferences or meetups and like meet with people and volunteer, I think that would set you apart as well from other candidates. um, So second thing, definitely a portfolio. I always tell students who like are in the middle of like applying to just get started on their portfolio as soon as they start third year, because in my program, you need to have an internship between the summer of third and fourth year. So I tell them get started like over the summer of second year. Make sure you have your portfolio done and ready to apply with by September. And I don't think a portfolio is ever going to be perfect. I changed mine a lot since
Right.
um, the the one I applied to Microsoft with doesn't even exist anymore. Like I completely changed it.
Yeah.
But I think it's more important to just show the type of work you're able to do and how you're able to communicate that work. I think is really important. Um, Something that stands out with Microsoft a lot is if you've done work with multidisciplinary teams, so work with user researchers or developers or even other designers, they want to know that you're able to like collaborate with other people.
Right.
And yeah, speaking of like collaboration, Microsoft is really big on hack culture, especially the garage. They're really, I like to think of my internship as it was kind of like a 4 month long hackathon. So they're really into that culture. So I think participating in hackathons really gives you that edge to be a good candidate as a Microsoft Garage intern, because not only does it give you opportunity to collaborate and work with different people, but you end up having good portfolio projects at the end of it as well. And then the last point is kind of self-explanatory, but just being passionate and driven and showing that you want this, you're able to like grow as a designer, and just putting yourself out there with confidence, I think really makes a huge difference as well.
Right. Agreed completely.
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about how I like the whole interview process
Sure.
as well.
Sure.
So it's pretty standard as to like what other interviews were like. So I got, as I said, I got reached out on LinkedIn, and one thing that I'm happy I did is that I just grabbed that opportunity as it came. So as soon as my recruiter sent me that application link, I applied right away because my resume was ready, my portfolio was ready. So I think that's why it's so important to be prepared for these situations, because they can come at you whenever and you want to be able to grab them as soon as you can.
Right.
And then I asked, I actually didn't know about the Microsoft Garage program at all. So I asked questions and tried to like learn a little bit more about the program so I'd be prepared if I were to move on to the phone screening process. So for the phone screening, this happened about like a week and a half after I got reached out to LinkedIn. So they said that they reviewed my resume and they wanted to set up a 30-minute phone call interview over the phone. So I never had a phone screening before, so I didn't know what to expect. But luckily, some people in my program who were a couple of years above me had done the Microsoft Garage internship
Oh,
previously,
nice.
so they were able to like help me and guide me through that
Right.
process. But essentially, the phone screening, you just go through your resume, they kind of ask you to talk about your experiences. They talk about what kind of professional you are, what kind of collaborator you are. I think that's really important to them. They want to know if you are able to work with developers, are able to work with PMs, because in the garage internship, you will be working with developers and PMs. So they want to know if you have that collaborative nature in you.
Right.
And then they talk about a little bit about what your design process is, how you tackle problems, and then you're able to like ask them questions as well. So the person that was interviewing me used to be a garage intern, and then she turned full-time. So I just asked her about her experience and what she liked about the internship and how I could like set myself up for success if I were to get it as well.
That's
And
really
then
great.
yeah, so that was like 30 or 40 minutes.
Yeah,
And then afterwards, like obviously I was thinking like, oh, I should have asked this and this and this,
right.
but I think
That always happens.
you, yeah, that always happens. So I think being prepared is very important. So I did take like a bunch of notes based on my own research and then what I talked to like previous interns about. So I think reaching out to your community, if you know people who've interviewed in similar scenarios before, most people are really happy to share their experience. So I think that helped me kind of be like more prepared. And then I could always like look at my notes if I forgot anything. And then lastly, the biggest part was the final interview. So after about another week or so, I got an email saying that they wanted to fly me out to Vancouver for in-person interviews. And I got this email on, I think, a Tuesday, and they were trying to fly me out on the Saturday or Sunday. So it would happen very, very quickly. So the weekend, I just like packed up a backpack like full of things I could use for like 3 days, and then went to Vancouver. And that day was probably one of the longest days of my life because it was 4 back-to-back interviews that were 45 minutes each, like
Yeah.
one-on-one interviews.
Hmm.
And and then we started off with a presentation. So I started off presenting one project to the whole panel of interviewers for 10 minutes. They didn't get to ask any questions or anything. I just had to like present my project to them. And then afterwards, one by one, they would take like each designer and have a one-on-one 45-minute interview. And a lot of these interviews really differed from each other. So some of them were more like behavioral questions. They were asking me like, oh, if you were in a situation where you had to rationale your design decisions to your developers, like how would you communicate those things, and what would you do if there was like this team conflict, and just to see how you would handle things, because as a garage intern you are the sole designer on your team, so you have that responsibility to lead design, and they want to make sure that you're able to do that. And
Right.
then yeah, and then other questions, they were like just walk me through a project on your portfolio, and what are like talk a little bit about like your past experiences. So it's really interesting because some of my interviews I really enjoyed because they were very conversational, and I just felt like I was a conversation with someone, and other ones felt a little bit more formal. I guess it depends on like who's interviewing you, but my main piece of advice is if you can treat it as a conversation as much as possible, it'll just be better for both you and the interviewer. It'll be a bit more comfortable, and it'll actually be really enjoyable as well. So after that, like these were like this huge long day. Um, After that, like all the interns like went out for like food afterwards, to, like de-stress and celebrate,
Yeah.
and things like that. And I had a friend living in Vancouver, so I like hung out with her as well. And then the day after my interview, I was expected to fly back to Toronto. And in the airport, I actually got my offer over email. So everything happened very, very quickly. It was kind of very surreal. I honestly didn't believe it for like the longest time that it actually happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's probably like one of the interviews I'll never forget. It was very stressful, but also very enjoyable as well.